start streaming.
There's this much of a delay.
Yes, there is a delay. I've told you that before. When I've been monitoring yours. And when you consider that delay, considering that you've got ads in front of it, it's quite possible to lose bits at the beginning.
Yeah. So you're all good to go?
Okay. So, build that up in the background so I can at least see the chat room. And I've got Black Wolf up. Okay. So.
You've got a special request to do erotica as your next story.
I think Twitch might have some opinions about me reading any of my erotica live. Anyway, hi folks. Obviously, different setup today. The rather makeshift one that I did in my room was honestly absolutely killing my back. So, now I'm in a nice comfy chair in the living room with a, again, makeshift backdrop. And hopefully it will be physically a little more comfortable. We can hope. Was there anything else I needed to say? I don't think so. I'm Prism Cat, aka Steph, depending on where you know me from, if anywhere. I write stuff. And if you want the print copy or text copy of Black Wolf, which is the novel that I have been reading here live on Twitch, you can get it at prismcat.com/blackwolf. All one word, or with a hyphen in the middle, your choice. It'll go to the same place.
Or if you click about.
Or click on about down below. Yeah, I'm not a pro voice actor. I'm just a writer who decided that I would start reading my stuff out loud on Twitch in case anybody felt like listening. And so far a few people have. So, if you're out there and you're lurking and you don't feel like talking, that's fine. If you're enjoying just listening in, that's awesome. But if you feel like saying hi, that's cool too. Although, expect me to probably get awkward while I'm trying to shift gears, because I'm not good at small talk. Okay, we got as far as through chapter 29 yesterday, and Jess is having a seriously rough time and has basically gone back to the city thinking that nobody will listen to him and that he has managed to screw everything up. And all of his friends in Haven are freaking out, wondering what the hell happened and how they can find him and fix this. So, 30. Gisela had been lingering on the fringes of Deanna's covens for as long as she could remember, a pattern broken only for the time Deanna had been with Rebecca. Not since she had first heard it proclaimed that Coven's Sundark had been born had she seen anything more than the usual disagreements within any close-knit group. Certainly nothing like what she was faced with now. Not wanting to be alone, she had walked out to Sundark's house to wait for them to finish their usual once-a-week circle. Curled up on the couch beside the wood stove, soaking up its heat, she could hear the voices from the next room, loud and angry. She winced. It might give them a chance to release some of the tension, but doing it this way was only going to leave bad feelings behind. In a sense, she could understand it. Worry for Jess was gnawing at her too, though she did her best to maintain the calm serenity a healer should show. She just wished they'd find a different outlet. On second thought, being alone might not be so bad after all. She wasn't sure she wanted to be here when this circle ended. Wearily, she uncoiled herself and made her way back out of the house. Tomorrow she'd see what she could do about the chaos. No one was likely to be very receptive tonight. She trudged home, not even the bright moon she normally loved walking under, doing much to dispel her gloom. Her family was concerned, but she fled to her room and closed her door. She knelt by the window, petting the fluffy grey-brown tabby sprawled full length on the sill. He raised his head and began the low thunder of a purr. "You've got it lucky, Furball," she murmured. "You have people to pet you and feed you and spoil you, and you don't have to worry about much of anything. The people who spoil you have all kinds of things we have to worry about." She rubbed his pale gold belly, and he twisted over on his back so she could reach more easily. "Jesse can't be gone forever. We're bound together, me and him and Kev. Something'll happen. He'll be back." Section break. The next day didn't go precisely as she hoped. What she wanted to do was talk to Sundark, and try to get everyone to see that attacking each other wasn't going to undo the damage, while working together just might find Jess. She walked to the village proper, letting the internal pull guide her towards Kevin. Too bad they couldn't use the same link to find Jess, but that would take more than a spider silk thread. She found him, and she also found Rebecca and Moira. The latter pair were leaning against Donovan Skydrum's store, Arachne's loom. She didn't think Kevin had noticed them yet, too tangled in his own depression. "Dear me," Moira said loudly, with blatantly false solicitude. "Poor Sundark. Should have been more careful about who they called a friend." Kevin whipped around, his melancholy melting into anger. "Damn you, Becky, you did this! You sent Avril to vamp him! Why? I thought all that was finally over!" Gisela saw a dark look flicker across Rebecca's face. Then she smiled charmingly. "You should never take me for granted. You should know that. Anyway, Avril set up the trap, but you closed it. It was a transparent trap, and you walked right into it. I don't know whether he can change, but apparently you can't." Kevin whipped a ball of scarlet mage fire at her. Moira deflected it. Gisela watched most of the people on the street turn wary, many of them edging away, or leaving the vicinity outright. She knew Kevin would notice, too, despite his current focus, and that it would only feed the fire. "Come on, Becky," Kevin hissed. "You want to fight? Let's have it out. You and me, right here, right now. Come on." "Why should I?" "You a coward, wolf bitch? You a dog under all that red fur, killing chickens by moonlight? How are the wild male wolves? Better than I was? Do you have to dominate them first?" Rebecca bared her teeth in a savage snarl. "You little—" "Stop it!" Brian commanded, interposing himself, Deanna a step behind him. Gisela released the breath she'd been holding. They wouldn't let Kevin fight. "A fight here would endanger too many innocent people. I thought you had learned better by now, Kevin." "Leopards can't change their spots. Why should I care if others get hurt?" Deanna stepped in front of him and met his gaze with hers. Gisela felt the fringes of it as Deanna mentally threw the full force of her anger at him. Much like a physical slap, it rocked him back a step and brought tears to his eyes. Of shock as much as pain, Gisela thought. Oops, messed that up. "Damn you, mage! You're doing this on purpose. Punishing yourself. Now grow up and get a grip on yourself, or so help me." She trailed off, tears on her cheeks. "Oh, hell. Let them go, Brian. Maybe they'll hurt each other badly enough to learn something." "Not here," Brian insisted. "You want to fight, you go elsewhere. Alone." Rebecca regarded them all haughtily. "It's not worth the energy. Come on, Moira." Rebecca and Moira left in one direction. Deanna strode furiously away in another. You know what I forgot to do before I streamed?
Huh.
Feed the kids.
What was it like?
Maybe
Not what would you like? But
you could try splitting one of those cans of duck pate between the three of them. That will probably make them happy. Although I don't know if they've actually finished their breakfast, but him in particular, I want to eat.
who makes it?
It's on the left-hand side in the top box. Shiny can, green label. You see it? Yes, we have a lot of flavors of cat food. But that might be what he's after.
Duck recipe?
That's it. Rebecca and Moira left in one direction. Deanna strode furiously away in another. There's only one way you'll find Jessie, Brian said, and that's together. There will be a fight right here if you don't get out of my way, Kevin said savagely. Take care of your own coven and leave ours to us. Jesse's my friend too. There are a lot of people worried about him. Haven't you realized yet just how many lives he's become a part of? Coven Sundark does not have some exclusive claim on him. Sam is frantic trying to find him. Then I wish her best of luck, and she can talk to him when she does. The mage whirled away. Gisela went after him. Had to run to catch up. Kevin barely glanced at her. What do you want? A hug? He stopped. Actually looked at her this time. After a pause, he offered both arms. She hugged him hard, resting her head against his chest, and tried to send him as much love and reassurance as she could. We'll find him, Kevin told her firmly. When and how, I don't know, but we'll find him. Not this way we won't. Sunlark altogether maybe could... He pulled away, the walls coming back up. Teamwork is a bit hard when everyone is more interested in calling names. So stop calling names. Go home, Zella. Let us worry about our own coven. But stay out of it. He turned away from her too, and she let him go. She tried Flynn, and got a similar reaction. Despondently, she gave up, and detoured to the pet store to get hamster litter so she could clean their cages. Sam's eyes were red from crying. Mutely, she rang in the litter, and accepted the money Gisela gave her. The healer fled, unable to stand yet another bout with intense grief just now. She went home, found Deanna there asking their parents if she could have her old room back for a while. This was too much. She closed her bedroom door and lost herself in playing with her hamsters on the bed while the cat slept on her pillow and completely ignored them. Section break. Everybody's got food? Okay. Usually on Thursdays, she went out to Sundark's house, had supper with them and Jess, and afterwards, Jess walked her home on his way to the brewery. This Thursday, she stayed in her room, and the only ones who were happy were the cat and the hamsters, who were getting more spoiled than usual. She jumped when someone knocked on her door. Yeah? Samantha opened the door, closed it behind her, and came to sit on the edge of the bed. One of the hamsters ventured over to investigate. For a change, Sam looked more determined than depressed. This nonsense has gone on long enough. The only way we're going to find him is to use everything we've got, which means you and I are going to have to go beat Sundark over the head until they behave themselves. Up for it? They won't listen. I've tried. This will be both of us. We can't give up. We'll make them see. She stroked a hamster with one finger as it climbed onto her denim-covered leg. Are you going to make me do this alone? Gisela sighed. No, I'll come, but I don't think it'll do any good. She got up and started catching hamsters to return them to the complex of cages and tunnels that covered one corner of her room. Sam helped, and they left the house together, Gisela calling to the first person she saw, her little brother, where she was going. Sam, interestingly enough, had Coven Winter's dark plum van. A good thing, though, once she thought about it, since otherwise Sundark might finish Circle before they ever got there. The front door was unlocked, as it generally was since the wards had been reactivated in the outer walls. They went in, found Sundark in the usual room, all sitting on the carpeted floor. They paused in the doorway, and no one noticed. Under normal circumstances, interrupting a coven circle was unthinkably rude, but these weren't normal circumstances, and this was very obviously not a normal circle. Kevin and Deanna sat in sullen silence. Bane and Cynthia were quarreling, interrupting each other so much it was impossible to make out what the problem was. Flynn surveyed them all with a weary expression. "Do something!" Cynthia demanded of Flynn. "You're supposed to be leading right now." "Why? Face it, no one wants to be here. Kev, I'm sure, would rather be off challenging Rebecca, and Bane would rather be killing something out in the forest. Personally, I think I could be getting farther at home with my cards and my runes and a bowl of water. What about you, Cynthia? Dia? Where would you prefer to be?" "Anywhere alone," Deanna said tightly. "I don't give a damn about Rebecca," Kevin said angrily. "Then where would you like to be?" "Back in time about 2 weeks." "To hurt Jess all over again?" Cynthia asked. "Like you would have done anything else." Gisela flinched. What a mess. Why did they have to act like this, trying to hurt each other? "All of you, be still," Sam commanded. They all froze, turning as necessary to track the intrusion. Samantha strode out of the hall. Gisela followed her. "This is truly pathetic," Sam scolded. "Dia, I know you went home to Helix. Brian tells me, Bane, you're back with your parents, and that according to Laurie, Kevin, you've been at your grandmother's for the last week. What exactly is that supposed to accomplish? What is all this fighting supposed to accomplish?" Can I have a piece? Gisela wondered why Sam wanted her there, since she seemed to have Sundark's full attention on her own. Moral support, maybe? Only silence answered Sam's demand. "Do you really want to find Jessie and leave all this behind?" More silence. "Yes," Flynn said. "What did you have in mind?" "I want full agreement. That it's irrelevant who did what and whose fault it is, and that what matters now is finding Jess." I'm not taking the whole plate. "That what matters now is finding Jessie and convincing him to come home." Sorry, I realized I also forgot to eat lunch.
I just remembered that too.
I definitely agree. "Me too," Deanna said unwillingly. One at a time, grudgingly, so did the others. Sam nodded curtly. "Remember that. Then right now, we're going to get to work looking for that wolf cub. Kev, Della, you two are the best chance we have of getting a fix on him. So help me, we will try every night until we find him." The circle shifted, left space for Sam and Gisela. So this was why Sam had wanted her along. It was intensely frustrating, though. Her abilities, useful only at immediate range, Gisela could only sit still and be patient, while they used the bond between her and Kevin and Jess as a starting point. They searched for an hour, took a short break, spent another hour hunting. After the third hour, Kevin objected. "That's enough for tonight." "He's right," Cynthia admitted reluctantly. "We'd better call it quits for now." Samantha nodded. "Tomorrow night, I'll meet you here at 6, and every night until we find him." Section break. Macintosh apples from the farmer's market. Which actually deserve to be lingered over more than I'm going to right at the moment.
Farm fresh, yeah.
You gotta admit, they're better than any apple you've ever found in a grocery store.
Yeah. And the same place does the squished.
Yes, and you're absolutely in love with their homemade cider. Unfortunately, it might be a little bit before we can get that again.
Order it and have them arrange. It'll probably be a part of next week's ordering system.
True. Okay, sorry. There was a section break there, and now I'm going back to reading. Unfortunately, being in the living room puts me a little bit more in the center of everything that's going on in the household. You're not leaving. I'm not chasing you off of your computer. Gisela bolted awake in the middle of the night. Heart pounding, she tried to calm herself and sort out where the rush of fear came from. She heard Deanna's bed groan, heard her scrambling around. The healer slithered out of bed and darted down the hall. "Dia, what is it?" "I think we've got a fix on Jess. Nightmare that caught the whole coven. And Flynn's cards say it was real. Hang on, Kev's going to..." She didn't even have time to finish the sentence before Kevin's gate exploded into the room. Deanna sent Gisela across and followed her. A second gate swirled into sight, and Laurie sent Sam and Flynn and Naomi, with Gwyn, across ahead of her before following. Flynn must have gone to Sam's to give Kevin an anchor, and found Laurie and Naomi there. There was no sign of either Bane or Brian, though. "Wolves?" Gisela asked. "Out for a run," Naomi said. "They're on their way back," Kevin added, "but they can't do much anyway, and we can't wait or waste the power right now for another gate. They'll be here." The house had a definite chill at this hour. Most grabbed for mage silk blankets to throw over various combinations of day and night clothes, and they settled in a ring close to the wood stove. All things combined, nightmare and triangular connection and all the power they could muster gave them just enough that they could gain a focus of sorts after days of coming up empty. And once Flynn had that much to work with, it was a matter of time. And not much of it at that. "Oh, hells," Flynn said. "Kev, you need to get there now with as much power as you can grab from us." "Without Bane?" Laurie protested. "Kev, 100 miles from Bane." "We'll still be close to a wolf if Flynn hits the right spot," Kevin interrupted, already getting up. "Worst comes to worst, you gate so I can get back here. If Jess is in danger now, then I'm not waiting." Chapter 31. A curious red squirrel nosed about in the underbrush, rattling in the soggy leaves kept snowless by the dense evergreens above. Something caught its attention, something out of place, which of course meant that investigation was in order. It sniffed at the pile of soft stuff and smelled something that wasn't quite like the scent left in the campground nearby, but wasn't quite part of the forest either. It smelled something tasty, too, so it began to gnaw at the soft barrier, which yielded delightfully easily. A large black rock, mostly invisible in the shadows cast by the light of the setting sun, stirred, and divided into two smaller, mud-splattered black shapes. One raised its head, snarled, and lunged to its feet, directly after the squirrel. Indignantly, the squirrel bolted up a tree and sat on a branch to scold the wolf, tail flicking. Andrew yawned and got up. Got up and stretched languorously, while Jason padded over to examine the damage. He shifted to human, growling in annoyance. "Your breakfast," he called to the squirrel above them. "You set one paw out of that tree, and you are food." The squirrel, unimpressed, chattered at him a little longer, then went bounding away through the tree branches. Andrea changed to human and came over to untangle her clothes from the pile. "That's what you get for leaving a bag of trail mix where they can smell it," she commented. "How many animals are stupid enough to come that close to two wolves? And it chewed a hole in my backpack." "So fix it, just like you fixed the other holes in it. Come on, let's get dressed and let's move." She tossed him his faded, many times patched blue jeans, his ragged navy sweatshirt. Still grumbling to himself, he caught them neatly. Her own camo pants were under that, and an equally tattered sweatshirt she thought had once been red, but was now a sort of dull pink. Winter coats and boots lay beneath. Looking more or less human again, they scooped up the 2 packs that held everything they owned, and made their way back to the highway. Occasionally a car drove by, a brief, blinding glare of headlights, then the distant glow of taillights. Otherwise the highway was silent, bathed in silvery light by a moon just past full. They didn't bother trying to hitch a ride. At night, on a mostly deserted stretch of road, who was going to stop and pick up a wild-looking pair like them? They just walked quietly, not talking much. The next town would still be there, whenever they reached it. She saw Jason toying with something in one hand, but didn't have to ask what. He had bought the cherry-sized amethyst in a lapidary shop for $1 a few weeks ago. It wasn't the first, and she doubted it would be the last. Amethysts were simply irresistible to him. He said they gave his luck an extra boost, but that wasn't what she figured the attraction was. She had to get his mind back on the present. Left too long to brood, he'd slip back into that frightening depression. "Jace, how are we doing for money?" "Oh, we've got the 20 that guy gave you a few nights ago for fixing his car, and some spare change." "Maybe we can find a bar between here and Fallius that won't ask for ID, she suggested, complete with the usual fool who, in all his macho confidence, just knows I can't possibly drink him under the table. That got her a quick smile. "Maybe so," he agreed. "Or maybe something else will come up. Even if nothing does, at least we won't be wandering into Irminsul as broke as usual. I don't care how good an actual meal tastes. I hate begging for it." "What are you chortling about over there?"
I'm very sorry. Political. Trudeau confirms to Global News that the White House wants to put American troops near the Canadian border to monitor illegal border crossers. Trudeau says they are in discussions with U.S. officials in the best interest of both nations to remain demilitarized. The comment above it, is he trying to stop Americans from leaving? Because I can guarantee you no Canadians are trying to join that shit show.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I don't think there's a big risk of Canadians trying to get into the U.S. right at the moment.
I'm sorry, it was a way... I'm sorry, I shouldn't have looked it up. I'm sorry.
Be good. Stop distracting me. Otherwise I will boot you out of the living room. I don't care how good an actual meal tastes. I hate begging for it. His expression turned distant, wistful. Maybe one of these days we'll find him. No need to ask who he meant by him. She heard the prayer at least once a day. "We'll find him," Andrea assured him, as she always did. "Demon luck is weird stuff. It might take us a while, but we'll find him. And you know, Jess, one of these days we'll come around a corner and he'll be there, probably asking what took us so long." Maybe. He shook himself out of that mood, back into the here and now. Wonder how everything's going in Irminsul. Should be interesting to find out what we missed since we were through Endor. Andrea hugged her brother with one arm. "Just think, another day or two, and we can have a warm bed, and hot showers, and real food. Something other than fresh killed and junk food. Hey, I think I see lights up ahead, look." Jason looked. "I think you're right." Quiet again. Andrea relaxed. Jason would be too busy thinking of ways to part fools and money. He'd be all right now. For another night at least. It was growing harder all the time to keep him out of the melancholy. Out of the melancholy, though. What was going to happen when she could no longer help? I wish I still believed in something I could pray to, that Jason's right and Jess is still alive, and that we'll find him before Jace goes too deep for me to reach him. I didn't even want to think what being apart is doing to Jess, too. The lights proved to belong to a village of reasonable size. They scouted around it and found it generally average. There were in fact 3 restaurants, and one advertised a bar on the sign. Still too early, Andrew said. The clock on the bank said it was only a little past 9. They'd be more likely to find the kind of sucker they wanted more towards midnight. Jason nodded, counting through a handful of coins. What have you got? She turned up 2 tens, a toonie, a loony, 3 quarters, 2 dimes, and a few nickels and pennies. If we use the change, we can get fries and a drink to share at one of the other restaurants, and we'll have $20 to bet, Jason suggested. Sounds good. Section break. Morning found them some distance farther along the highway, with $40 between them, thanks to a farmer who couldn't believe that a slender girl would be able to outdrink him, and his friends who had been more than confident about making bets with Jason. They left the road, wandered into the woods, and found a comfortable-looking place to strip and shift a wolf. Together they hunted a porcupine, enough meat to give them both a heavy meal. Then they returned to where they'd left their belongings, and curled up into a single heap of black fur to sleep the day away. A quick sip of tea. Okay, it wasn't a sip, it was a gulp. "32. Shane prowled the streets, all senses alert, while his mind mulled over possible sources of money for rent. His luck was no longer as good as it had once been. He knew why. His lack of purpose in life, without Jessie to watch over, was eroding the carefully erected self-control that made it possible for him to function in what was, to him, an alien environment. If Jess only knew what it had cost him to provoke that fight to drive Jess away to Haven to stay. Any cost was worth it. Jessie was there, and had the life he deserved, finally. However lonely that left Shane, there seemed little point now, no more reason to try. Yet he continued to fight for survival. A well-dressed man of about 40 caught his eye. Shane contemplated walking up to him and asking for money, backing it with just enough charm to make it sound like a perfectly reasonable request. He'd gotten anywhere from $10 to $50 by doing that on other occasions. He took a few steps in that direction, planning out not only words but inflections and tone as he moved. A familiar sensation tingled up Shane's spine. Suddenly losing interest in money, he left the area swiftly, let himself disappear into the darkness of the back alley. What was going on? Jessie was supposed to be in Haven. It took time. Too much time. He couldn't track Jessie properly. There was something interfering, making him lose his focus repeatedly. His frustration increased, held in check only by firm self-discipline. It was taking so long. The feeling of the interference was familiar, nagging at him. Something beyond the fact that Jess was full-heeled and aware of himself now. He found a name for it, abruptly, and that name was Elven Mage. He all but stumbled across Jessie, with no warning. Jessie, in a back alley, huddled in a corner, eyes closed, breathing alarmingly fast and shallow. Jessie, with an elf coming unhurriedly closer. With no hesitation, Shane stepped between. "Get out of my way," the elf commanded. Shane folded his arms across his chest, feet spread for balance. No. The elf blinked in surprise. What? I told you! With a powerful, magical suggestion behind it, at that. I heard you. I'm not moving. Leave him alone. I promise you, I am not someone you want to mess with. Light shimmered around the elf, blurring details, making it hard to look at him directly. Shane focused a little to one side. Who needed to actually see, anyway? I'm supposed to be impressed. Go ahead, take your best shot, elf. The light gathered around the mage's hand, and he threw it. Shane held quite still, forcing himself to stay calm, but only with difficulty. Gazing at the ball of fire intently, he called the moisture of the air around it tightly, suffocating it and dampening it. Before it touched him, it vanished. That was your best shot? The elven mage backed off a pace, warily, the halo of light fading away to only a faint outline. Shane grinned to himself. Yes, the elf would be uneasy. To all appearances, it was an entirely ungifted human facing him so coolly. No mage survived long if he were foolhardy enough to challenge something he had no way to judge. Cautiously, the elf gestured, and colored light swirled around Shane, coalescing into a dome-shaped cage. Shane shrugged offhandedly. Yeah, so? What next? To judge by the elven mage's growing annoyance, he was used to his theatrics provoking more of a reaction. Another gesture, and the cage began to constrict. Shane sighed and closed his eyes briefly, reaching inside. Using anything but the most basic of his gifts was hard after so long, and after having locked everything down as ruthlessly and absolutely as possible. He could do it, though. He just had to find the place inside where the magic came from, and... The elven mage jumped backwards, alarmed, as the light cage exploded outwards like shattering glass. Shane dropped to a crouch, one arm up to protect himself from the shower. The elven mage threw up a shield of fire around himself, just long enough for the deadly rain to pass. What are you? He spat. Hello. Shane straightened and smiled. Wouldn't you like to know? Whatever you are, you won't have a chance in a real fight against me. How sure of that are you? Sure enough to bet your life on it? He reached upwards, into the few clouds he could sense above, coaxing them together, summoning more. He was going to be exhausted for days after this. Still, if he could stand off this elven mage... The elf gestured, and light formed into a long, fiery whip. He swung it menacingly back and forth a few times, as though testing its balance. Though not at all sure he could counter that, and very sure he didn't want even brief contact with it. Excuse me. Shane simply waited, still with that smile calculated to irritate. The elven mage swung at him, with the full force of his anger behind it. If that thing wrapped around him as intended, the damage it did would not be at all pretty. Please let this work. The bright lash whipped through where Shane was standing, without slowing. The elven mage, off balance, spun in a full circle and dropped to one knee. The whip disappeared. Shane laughed mockingly. You wanted to try. No way was he going to let the elf see what phasing had taken out of him, or how frighteningly close he had come to not being able to reverse it, but he resolved not to do that again. Ever. The elven mage got to his feet, expression dangerous. He flung out a hand, and a beam of cold, white light shot from his palm towards Shane. With no time to think, old training took over. A mirror of clear ice spun out of the air's moisture, caught the light beam, and bounced it back. At an angle. It hit a nearby building instead and lanced straight through the brick. Just over the head of another, much younger elven mage who had just stepped through a gate of light. He ducked reflexively. The first mage frowned. "You again!" The newcomer placed himself between the first mage and Shane and Jesse. "Leave them alone. I'm not scared to fight to protect my friends. You know that already. Are we really going to have to go through this a second time?" The second mage had to be Kevin. Shane remembered Jesse's vivid descriptions of him, and who else would show up from nowhere to protect him? Shane decided to let him handle it. He retreated to crouch beside Jesse, ready to defend them both if necessary, with whatever he had left. He glanced up at the sky, at the ominous clouds darkening the stars. The air was getting heavy with static. That should mess up magic of any kind, a little. "I warned you I'd be ready for you next time," the other mage said coldly. "You won't be pulling dirty tricks again." Light swirled and thickened around him. Shane looked away, but Kevin didn't appear to have any trouble with it. Light gathered around Kevin, too, but the shield before him was visibly more fragile, and only a semicircle, not a full ring. "Wait a minute. There's not very much light in this alley. Where the hell is that mage getting power to do this stuff?" A closer look at the other mage's shields answered that question, but he didn't like it at all. The shields were dark, heavy crimson and syrupy saffron, with threads twining through it of no color meant for the mortal plane. Demon power laced into his own, tainting even his birthright gifts. Kevin's held only the pure gold of the sun at dawn, the white of noon, the red of sunset. Shit, this is not good. Just as well for Kevin, he has an ally too, even if he doesn't know it. And so help me, nobody who deals with demons is getting anywhere near Jess while I'm alive. The other mage gestured and sent a cascade of fireballs? No, these weren't balls, they were flat discs, and they were coming edge on, which struck Shane as a bad sign. Kevin muttered something that sounded a lot like, "Oh bloody hell," and raised both hands, palm out. Most of the cascade shattered against his shields. The rest spun out of control and flung themselves uselessly at the walls around them. Kevin's shields trembled. Shane couldn't see his expression, but he could see the tension in his posture. And the other mage had followed the attack, closing the distance between them. Before Kevin had time to strengthen his shields, the other mage shaped a sword made all of fire and swung it in an arc that by rights should have removed Kevin's head from his shoulders. Kevin's shields winked out, reappeared much smaller and much more condensed, and deflected the sword away, even as Kevin ducked. He flung back a handful of blue-white fire that wrapped itself around the fire sword and ate into it. The other mage slashed at him again, kept battering away at the weakening shield with the sword, and was coming alarmingly close when the sword finally disintegrated in his hands. Shane saw Kevin release a breath he had been holding. "This doesn't make sense," Kevin said, frustrated and confused. "There's nowhere you can be getting that kind of power from. You certainly didn't have it last time." Some mage. He couldn't even recognize what was right in front of him. "Demons," Shane said. "He doesn't need a light source anymore. You must have caught him by surprise before." The other mage glanced at Shane, clearly surprised that a mere human knew that, but shrugged. "And?" "Oh, wonderful," Kevin sighed. "Bane's going to kill me." Give me the wolf and the human who challenged me, and there will be no fight. Somehow Shane didn't believe him. Kevin spread his feet for balance, took a deep breath, and raised both hands again. Right, like I'm going to let you near my friends so you can give them to a demon or something. Hardly. Shane wasn't sure whether to call it determination, stubbornness, or sheer bravado, but whichever it was, he had to give Kevin points for it, considering that he could have escaped easily to somewhere safe. The demon mage grinned. I had a feeling you'd say that. He threw another laser-like light bolt at Kevin, who reflexively shielded against it, even though there was no chance it would hold. Hastily, Shane cast a mirror just outside Kevin's shield. The light ray hit the mirror and deflected back. A second mirror turned it directly at its source. It scored glancingly across the other mage's chest and vanished into another wall. Kevin did a double take and shot Shane a measuring glance, but had no time for more. His opponent let out a howl of pain and rage, and threw a flurry of ordinary fire daggers at him in quick succession. The static in the air crackled, connecting with the mage fire, making sparks dance around the daggers. Shane frowned at them, calling together every trace of moisture he could reach from the air around them, from the garbage bins 10 feet away, anything he could find to wrap around the daggers before they could reach Kevin. Even had Kevin been paying attention, which he wasn't since he was too busy doing something else, what remained of his shields couldn't have stopped them. It wasn't enough. He had to reach upwards, into the clouds, for more. It gave the static within them a path downwards, too, which was, at this point, likely to hamper Kevin more than the other mage, but there was no help for that. The ambient light of the city, intertwined with what Shane was alarmingly certain was the last of Kevin's personal reserves, gathered and grew brighter, some 20 feet above the ground. Brilliant wings spread wide, beat once, twice, and the phoenix dived at the other mage, the static striking even more sparks around each fiery feather. Talons that glinted hard and cold as diamond extended as it stooped. Even as the phoenix formed, the other mage gestured imperiously with both arms, frowning in concentration, and a kind of storm coalesced. Shane had no name for it, but he doubted being touched by any of those intense streaks of colored light would be healthy, even had it not been created with demon power. And the channel Shane had formed, directly from the clouds above to the battlefield below, remained in place. Phoenix and Storm met 15 feet above, and joined with the improbably heavy static charge in the air. Beams of light exploded in all directions, although they seemed to do little true damage. The air glowed with something strongly reminiscent of the aurora borealis, that certainly didn't belong in a city alley. Swirling shapes of colored fire spun randomly, in complete disregard for gravity. Raw power made the very air shiver and shimmer. Shane ducked, covering Jesse with his own body, shielding as strongly as he could with all the power he had left. As an afterthought, he rerouted some into a shield around Kevin, aware that Kevin also, somehow, was finding enough reserves to shield all three of them. It seemed to take forever for the storm to calm. Shane raised his head, cautiously, surveying the alley. Kevin was on his knees, head down, as small a target as possible. The other elven mage was gone without a trace. "You okay?" Kevin asked hoarsely, stretching carefully. His eyes weren't really tracking much, Shane noticed, though he'd had no perceptible trouble during the fight. Must have something to do with being an elf. Who's asking who that? Shane thought ironically, straightening. "Yeah, I'm all right. You?" I think so. Blessed gods, I've never seen anything like that happen before. Where'd the natural storm go? What natural storm? Got me, you're the mage. What brought you here? A hunch that Jess was in danger? Really? And what's Jess doing here? That's kind of hard to explain. Speaking of Jess, Shane turned around and swore. Where the hell did he disappear to now? Kevin echoed the curse and went quite still, presumably attempting a search in his own way. Shane did likewise, and wasn't surprised that he hit only a blank. Whatever Jess had been high on had to have left him briefly open to being tracked. Since that had apparently worn off, natural defenses were back in force. I'm dead, Kevin groaned. I lost him, and I haven't even got the strength left to find him at close range. We might still be able to track him, Shane said. He doubted it, but it was worth a try. He's only had, 2 minutes. Where do we start? And now that I can concentrate, a friend of mine is going to be here as fast as my cousin can build him a gate, and he can probably help with that, which might distract him temporarily from ripping my hide off. And before I go into shock and collapse into a useless heap, is there somewhere I can grab something to eat while we look? That is the end of 32. It's been the better part of an hour. I'm going to take a very, very, very short break and just, run to the bathroom, stretch a little bit. I'm really tired of my shoulders hurting after I stream, so maybe slightly more frequent breaks will help with that. So, I will be right back. Don't go anywhere. What are you giggling about over there?
Back support will also help. Go mute when you walk away, because it's still recording.
Unmute, and back to normal screen. Okay, hopefully that wasn't too long for anybody. Tried to make it quick. I need this, and I need this, and there we go.
Ooh.
Yes, there I am. And apparently my major distraction is about to start gaming over on the other side of the room, so hopefully that will keep her out of mischief and minimize the distractions. Hey dude! Do you want to come say hi? Trick, honey. Do you want to come sit with me? It's okay. Oh. Yeah. Say hi to the world. Say hi, I'm here. Is he even visible?
I see your forehead.
That's because I leaned down to pick him up. Hey, sweetheart. Hi. Okay, so you can actually see my purry boy. Okay.
Yeah.
Chapter 33. Jesse ran blindly, not caring what direction, certain only that anywhere was better than where Shane and Kevin were. Not completely carelessly, though. It would be very easy for Kevin to get one of the other wolves here to follow his trail, and Shane knew him much too well. He had survived by being able to vanish effectively. Having to break a scent trail was new, but he was sure he could do it. The sense of the city had been overwhelming to him when he'd come back fully wolf, and they were nonetheless familiar to him. To the Haven wolves who were unfamiliar with them, that background would make it much harder to follow a single trail. He zigzagged across busy streets, cut through a gas station, and scrambled over a fence at the back. Went straight to the doors of a busy nightclub that never checked ID, and then backed along the same path until he could use the hood of a car that was just pulling out as an alternate route. He slowed down as he came to a busier street, and let himself blend in with the others in the area, mostly pleasure seekers. When a park offered itself, he cut through that. He knew this park. This was the strange one. All hills and trees and rocks, with a sundial and fountain in the middle, like no other park he knew of, except the one in Haven on the lake. That didn't bear thinking about. He found a spot by the fountain, hidden by the curve of the hill, and settled there, hugging himself. His thoughts were crystal clear now. The LSD he had taken had worn off completely. It had been about 6 times the most he had ever ventured, deliberately, and he didn't think much time had passed between losing the real world and coming back to find both Shane and Kevin there. Pure proof of wolf resilience. It hadn't even been much of a trip. He couldn't, though, quite shake what he had seen. A thunderstorm, a black wolf howling in grief, but most vividly, a silver dagger that had danced just out of his reach. His mind flitted away to a memory of another dream of a dagger, one that had left him restless and unable to get back to sleep. Prowling the silent house, he found Bane coiled into a corner of the couch, reading. The alpha wolf looked up immediately. Can't sleep? Bad dreams. Will telling someone help? He turned over the book and patted the couch. Jess sat beside him and described the dream. Bane, listening attentively, began to stroke one hand over Jesse's hair. Jess winced reflexively from the touch, but Bane didn't stop, and despite his resistance, he found much of the tension easing away. He woke the next morning curled up against Bane, and the alpha wolf was dozing, leaning against the arm of the couch. It was the first time he had truly recognized how much power Bane had to influence his emotional state. It had taken some time for him to come to accept that Bane was far more likely to use it to comfort and protect than to abuse and hurt. It led irresistibly to another memory, coming across Kevin and Bane in the living room. Bane fur form, Kevin brushing him. They had coaxed Jess over and into fur form. He'd been so shy about changing in front of anyone for a long time. Between the two, once Bane got the other brush from the kitchen, they had put Jess in utter bliss for an hour or more. The memories hurt. He pushed them away. He had to think about right now, instead of wandering around in the past. What was he going to do now? He could probably avoid Kevin now, despite the soul link and the nearness, and he had no idea what Shane had been doing there. He could keep his eyes open and survive. Was it really worth it? He was too much of a coward to just kill himself. He'd have to just stumble through this however he could. Somehow, he'd survive. Just like he had always survived. Section break. Are you seriously messing with your phone while your game is up in front of you?
That's got thing from a friend of ours. So I went to check it and see how he was doing.
Patrick, as soon as he was alone in his hotel room, spat, "Sakyle, come!" His primary demon materialized in its usual form, and cringed into a corner as the mage whirled to face it. "You said he'd be alone and unprotected. I would hardly call that alone and unprotected." "Sorry, Master. So sorry. Others were not supposed to care now." "Obviously they do, if they were willing to stand up to me to protect him. If it hadn't been for the storm clouds and the static, I could have killed the mage and taken the other two. And they still stayed!" Dark visions formed behind his eyes, of sending one of the demons to take out all three of them. No, there'd be little satisfaction in that, compared to something more personal, and the power of their pain and deaths would be lost to him. Chance had played a part in this one, but still he had lost, had been thwarted a second time. That human is infuriating enough, but that Leoran mage? How dare he interfere with me again? "Yes, Master. What gives him the right to tell you who you may or may not have?" Sakyle raised its head, but kept its eyes low. "Everyone is equal in the villages, they say. Over and over," Patrick snarled. "If everyone is equal, why are strong mages catered to and indulged until they come to believe they can do anything they want, regardless of who they walk all over? He'll have it easy his whole life, with everyone bowing down to him, like strength makes him superior to everyone else." "They care more for that than for anything else," Sakyle whispered. "Intelligence means nothing to them. Original thinking means nothing to them." "Oh, original thinking means something to them. It's the ultimate crime. Right up there with daring to not kiss the ass of a strong mage." "This one expected you to, Master. He expected you to obey him and surrender immediately. He would not have come here, at night with so little light, if he had expected any challenge to his authority." "He hasn't seen a fraction yet of how I intend to challenge his authority." "Yes, Master. Show him. Show him that being born strong doesn't make him special. That being clever and inventive matter much more. We will help, Master. We won't be so careless again. No more mistakes." Patrick glowered at the demon, coldly. "You're right. There will be no more mistakes." He hadn't escaped the battle unscathed. He'd been carelessly lightly shielded at the moment that storm of chaos was unleashed, and to gate himself out of there he'd had to open himself to it yet further. It would take time to heal, and time to plan something suitable, especially for that interfering Leoran, the obvious product of a value system that gave special status to a strong mage. The first time he had seen the young wolf, he'd been intrigued by the psychic damage, the nature and extent of it. When Sakyle had told him the wolf was back in the city, alone and undefended, his curiosity had won out. At least he could learn how well the damage had healed. And with a little effort, he was sure there was more research he could do. Wolf resistance didn't apply to demon power. Now, fury overwhelmed anything else. All three were going to pay for this. They were going to die, and they were going to feed his power as they did. The only remaining question was, what would be the most satisfying way to do it? Section break. For the first time, in an uncommonly long while, the entire group of 3 covens and their solitary friends gathered in the living room of Sundark's huge house. "Well?" Bane prompted, gazing expectantly at his brother. "That's twice now that the same mage has shown an interest in Jess," Brian said. "At least, Kevin says it's the same mage." "It is," Kevin said firmly. Change in power level aside, the signature was definitely the same. Brian nodded. "And he's threatened Kev. I think we need to figure out how much of a danger this guy is." "He has to have come from somewhere," Deanna said. "He can't have just appeared from nowhere." "What do we know about him?" Eveline asked. "Kev?" "According to his response to my initial challenge," Kevin said, "his name is Patrick Lucian." Sonia's forehead furrowed. "That sounds familiar. Keep talking." Kevin shrugged. "He's obviously an elven mage. I would guess he's in his 30s, give or take. The first time I ran into him, I got the distinct impression that he wasn't very strong. I was terrified I had burned him out completely instead of just backlashing him when I lost my temper. The second time, he tore my shields into shreds in a matter of minutes, in a city alley with hardly any light, and he was throwing stuff at me that I suspect would have tired me out even in full daylight, if I could figure out how to do it in the first place. Serious combat magic stuff I've never seen before. I still don't know how I got out of that in one piece. There was some sort of bizarre reaction with a storm that was building or something." He kept his suspicions about what Shane had been doing to himself. It wasn't relevant, and he had no proof. How Shane would know, I have no idea, but he said it was demon magic. That's as good an explanation as any, I guess. There were some severely strange colors in his shields. He seems to get into a snit as soon as someone interferes with what he wants to do. Or when you interfere with what he wants to do, Sonia said thoughtfully. "Are you back again? Are you going to come up, or are you going to stay down there, or what? Are you at all able to help
him up? Yeah.
Help silly boy there? I don't think he knows where he wants to be."
Usually not.
"Come here. Come on. Come on, old dude. Hi." Well, that's an odd way to sit, but okay. "Or when you interfere with what he wants to do," Sonia said thoughtfully. "There was a Lucian mage in Phalius, I can't recall his first name, who left the village 10 or 12 years ago with no explanation. I wasn't all that old at the time, and I was rather distracted, 'cause my gifts were starting to wake up and drive me nuts." Nick closed a hand around hers. "Anything you can remember is more than we have. He was a mage, but not a very strong one. We're talking, say, with the average elf a 1 and an adept a 10, and Kevin Laurie around 8 or 9. He was about a 4 or 5. Unlikely to ever become adept, but still respectably strong," Laurie observed. "He never thought so. He was convinced that everyone looked down on him for it, and that stronger mages had special status that he had been cheated of. The Lucians in Phalius are a lot like the Haven branch. They turn up reasonably strong mages fairly consistently, but not very many adepts." She frowned. "I can remember vaguely bits of major scenes he started. claiming that the villages have a hierarchy based on family and power. Some junk about wolves believing they're the master race, too. Really warped stuff. My parents kept me out of hearing as much as they could. Mostly it was the strong emotions catching my attention, before I had much control. Which would certainly account for the reaction to Phoenix telling him what to do, Bane reflected. It's not like you're subtle, magically speaking, Kev. Yeah, and thrashing him so easily the first time probably didn't help, Kevin sighed. How was I supposed to know? Ah, yes, being strong has made my life, oh, so much easier. My own mother's terrified of me. You couldn't have known, and I'd have done the same, Laurie said firmly. So, it does sound like the same person, which means we have an extremely unstable elven mage running around, possibly making pacts with demons to give him the power he feels he should have had by birth. And he has a grudge against Kev for being strong and daring to tell him not to do something. We have no idea at all what his interest in Jess is. Demon pacts always have prices, Samantha said quietly. Given that it sounds quite likely that he is making bargains with demons and appears to be asking for power, the price is highly likely to involve blood and pain and possibly death, depending on how deeply into it he's gone. Be very, very glad you kept him away from Jess, Kev. A kind of unanimous shudder ran through the room, as the thought occurred to each of what that could have meant to Jess had this other mage gotten a hold of him. As for the change in power level, I would hazard a guess that you caught him by surprise the first time, before he had a chance to draw on power through his allies. Without them, he has only what nature gave him, and it's a shame you didn't burn him out completely at the time while he was vulnerable. Although again, there's no way you could have known. With them, well, the lowest prices are on enhancing what's already there. Did he do anything that you would consider outside your element? Kevin shook his head. I've never met a mage who bothered with combat stuff that heavily, but it was all fire and light. Now where on earth did Sam learn all this stuff about demons? Not that I'm ever gonna find out, I bet. Sam nodded. Then he probably hasn't gone so deep that he's killing frequently, but that power has to come from somewhere. And the most You okay?
Yeah.
No, Trick started doing
sorry.
funky little noises. But that power has to come from somewhere. And the most readily available source, if you're into quick gratification and a lot of power, is the gifts and emotions and energy of others. Bane growled, and the other wolves all tensed. He's turned himself into a predator. Essentially, yes, except that instead of feeding to stay alive, he's feeding for the sake of power. Eveline made a disgusted noise deep in her throat. That's worse than predators! I would say so. And he's a little too interested in Jess, Naomi said slowly. But we don't even know where Jess is to warn him, let alone to help him stay safe, Gisela said miserably, all the color gone from beneath her honey-tanned skin. There's another thing to consider, Sam said, though she sounded as though she were weighing every word. I've been reluctant to bring this up because I can't explain how I know, but I have reason to believe that there's one coven in Haven summoning demons. I think it's still only experimentation, but it could get very bad very quickly if they call the wrong demon or make even a small mistake. Who? Brian demanded. Who is that insane? Sam sighed. Whitethorn. Which is another reason I don't expect to be believed outside this room. Kevin didn't think he'd ever heard a room go so quiet. Oh, Becky, what the hell are you doing? Nothing's worth that. Other than the coincidence of both summoning demons and both having gone after Jess, Laurie said, is there a reason to believe that there's a direct connection? If my mic is picking up all of the keyboard tappity-tappity sounds, my tech support / roommate over there is currently playing Borderlands 3, and she has a gamer-type keyboard that is noisy. I don't know if the mic is picking it up or not. Oh, shush.
I'm just doing a mic check, that's all.
Yeah. I have no idea if my mic is picking it up, but I'm definitely hearing it.
If it is, I'm sorry.
Kevin didn't think he'd ever heard a room go so quiet. Oh, Becky, what the hell are you doing? Nothing's worth that. Other than the coincidence of both summoning demons and both having gone after Jess, Laurie said, is there reason to believe that there is a direct connection? Sam bit her lower lip. It might be just this Lucian after Jess for his own reasons, and Whitethorn for, well, whatever actually goes through the minds of Whitethorn. But it isn't impossible that there is some degree of demon interest in Jess underlying both. What I do know for sure is that I would feel much safer having Jess right here, because no hostile demon is going to get through the protections Sunlark built into the outer walls, ever. I'm not sure it matters, because there's nothing we can do about it that we weren't doing anyway. Black and White Hob climbed onto her lap. Automatically, she began to rub his ears. And you're right, there's no chance Catherine and Thomas would believe an accusation about Whitethorn from this direction, Laurie said unhappily. We'd have to tackle them ourselves. I'd really rather you didn't. I prefer you alive. I'll let you know if I have any reason to believe they're placing anyone else at serious risk, and we can rethink what to do. And you seriously can't tell us how you know this? I really can't. I'm sorry. Though Sam's reticence about her past was something they had all accepted long ago as her own choice, Kevin wondered whether he were the only one finding it considerably harder to take at the moment. He doubted it. Still, it would take extremely persuasive evidence to convince the Adepts, or most of the rest of Haven, that it wasn't an attempt at retaliation. He couldn't find it in him to doubt her, though. For her to bring it up, she'd have to be very sure. Great, Kevin muttered. Bane and I screw up. Now Jess is out there in very bad danger he doesn't even know about. And alone, unless Shane finds him. I didn't think I could feel worse. Not useful, Laurie told him firmly. We've been over that. Back on track. Knowing this, now what? I think, Flynn sighed, we're going to have to just hope like hell that he comes home on his own, or that we can find him again, and can convince him to. And meanwhile, trust to whatever luck has kept Jess alive this long to keep him that way a little longer. It's the end of 33. What would life be without tea? Dry and bland and boring.
And more Pepsi.
Barbarian. 34. And since I've been streaming for about an hour and 20 minutes or so, with a brief break in there, I might wrap up after this chapter. Probably will. On 4 feet, Jess sniffed around in the small patch of wild weeds and stunted trees behind a mini strip mall of half a dozen stores. He could smell raccoon, was certain that it was close, and coon would certainly taste better than rat or skunk or squirrel. Hey, little one! You want to come be on camera? She's sneakier than Trick is. Better at ducking out of my hands.
Mom, I'm ready for my close-up.
Freya? Freya? You can come on up if you want. And coon would certainly taste better than rat or skunk or squirrel. Now, where was it? He lifted his head from the tangled trails on the ground, searching the air for any clues as to which direction he should try. A combination of scents that had nothing to do with coon tore a growl from him and raised his hackles, even before his mind consciously registered it. Human terror and the acid-sweet smell of a predator. Oh, goodness! That's not the way I expected you to come up. Come here, fuzzball. Say hi to the peeps. Say hi, I'm Freya. Human terror and the acid-sweet smell of a predator. No way. I'm obviously a failure as a wolf too. Why should I bother risking my life? He fought the overwhelming need to hunt it, kill it, protect. But wolf instincts regarding predators ran too deep for mere depression to bury. It clawed at him mercilessly, worse than the memory of need for the uppers and downers he had once used to pretend his life was under control. Yes, honey, my computer belongs to you. Yes, you feel free to cheek mark all of it. He spun around and raced off in the direction of the predator's scent. Dinner would just have to wait. Not far away, in a sheltered corner behind a laundromat, he found both predator and prey. The human girl he recognized. She was about his age and spent a great deal of her time in the summer sitting on various stretches of sidewalk with colored chalk and her own fertile imagination, creating fantastic designs. That explained the interest of the predator. Creativity, passion, fear were all acceptable sources of nourishment. The predator itself was different from the only one he had actually encountered in Haven, and he couldn't recall anything like it in the descriptions his packmates had given him of various types. But so what? A predator was a predator. This one was 8-limbed, 4 of the limbs wide-pawed feet, 4 of them spindly, long-clawed arms. The whole thing massing probably roughly what he did. The glossy dark hide gleamed unpleasantly like oil in the scant light. 2 hands held the girl's arms, and the other 2 were exploring her body. Adding to her fear, Jess thought in disgust, spicing up the meal before feasting. All that took only a second or 2 to assimilate. Without a pause, he lunged directly at the predator, aiming for the back of the neck. There were very few creatures, according to his packmates, that could survive having their central nervous system severed. The head of the predator swiveled around like an owl's, more than 90 degrees from front, and 3 huge oval eyes fixed on him. The lipless slit that passed for a mouth opened, and it began to keen, a high-pitched sound that made Jess whine softly, even as his full mass connected with the predator and flung it aside, off the girl. It writhed and wrapped arms and legs around Jessie's torso, still keening. Jess turned his head and snapped savagely at it, but missed. All 4 paws planted firmly. He shook himself, struggling to think past the keening that abused his sensitive ears and made his skull feel like it would split. It hurt. Oh God, it hurt. Bane had never told him about a predator that used sound to attack, and the limbs wrapped around his ribs were beginning to constrict. Not being able to breathe was not helping him clear his thoughts. Come on, Jess, get it together or you're going to die. And going down in your second ever predator fight is too pathetic even for you. He shifted back to human, bare skin crawling at the greasy feeling of the hide against him. The predator, confused, didn't adjust its grip sufficiently, and the keening didn't cause such acute pain, though it was still uncomfortable. He twisted around and slammed the heel of his hand into the bottom of its jaw. The mouth closed with a small snick, and the keening faltered. Oh, thank God. He hit it again, aiming for the throat this time. Dazed and silenced, the predator's hold loosened, and Jess pried both pairs of hands apart. He squirmed his way free, with only a couple of shallow scratches to show for it. Panting hard, he shifted back to Wolf, and attacked, praying he could kill it before it started that keening again. He had to tear one arm off to get it out of his way, which took time. But then all four hands were pawing at its throat, and it was making hoarse, rasping noises. So it didn't matter, because it didn't appear to be able to breathe properly, let alone hurt him. His jaws closed, covering nearly the entire neck, and he braced himself and jerked sideways and up, bringing the powerful muscles of his neck and shoulders into play. Head neatly severed from body, the predator went limp, and in a matter of seconds dissolved into nothing. Jesse shook himself, pleased with his success. And he hadn't even gotten hurt doing it. Not really. Bane would be proud of him when he told... Except that he couldn't go tell his pack all about it, and celebrate the kill with them, and tell them about this new sort of predator. He couldn't go to his pack at all. The satisfaction turned to pain, an aching sense of emptiness. He heaved a sigh, and turned to check that the girl was going to be all right.
Sorry.
Lord, you're noisy.
What's that?
You're noisy. She was huddled against the wall, watching him with wide eyes, tears streaking her cheeks, and her breath coming in half-hysterical sobs. The fear scent was overpowering. He could pick up nothing else. She's as scared of me as she was of the predator, he realized. This wasn't Haven, or she'd have thanked him and been concerned about the blood streaking his sides, even if it wasn't deep. To her, he was as alien and terrifying as the thing that had attacked her, regardless of his having protected her. He whirled away and bolted, not caring where he was going, as long as it was somewhere else. Instinct took him to a little-known baseball field, tucked in behind a couple of huge government buildings. He stood in the middle of the field and howled his anguish and confusion to the stars, until a couple of strangers came into the park and yelled at him. He fled again, back to where he'd hidden his backpack and clothes, under the seldom-used back steps of a coffee shop. In the shadow of the garbage cans, he curled up as tightly as he could, too miserable to care about hunting. What difference did it make? What difference did anything make now? Section break. Jess sank down on a bench in a different park, under a moon that had passed from near new to full since he had seen Kevin and Shane, grateful for the shadows that concealed him. This was killing him by inches. Living like this wasn't worth it. Sleeping fur form in hidden corners, hunting the small wildlife of the city, or shoplifting chocolate bars, hating the thought of being around anyone. It was a twisted version of his blissful days alone in Haven's forest, and that only made him loathe himself and his life more. He wrapped his arms around his knees, shivering. He should have known better. Every time life began to look brighter, every time he was happy, his feet got kicked out from under him again, usually followed by a kick to the head. Being adopted, after so long being bounced through foster homes and waiting for his real parents to come and find him, only to have what seemed at first like heaven turn into a worse hell than that younger Jesse had ever dreamed could really happen. Now it was happening all over again, except that this time, the heaven was still real, only he had exiled himself from it. Shane had made it quite clear that he was tired of babysitting him, and he was no longer welcome. That left nothing but surviving the streets alone, with no hope of any change. Not even the temporary escape of acid or alcohol or anything else. He knew enough about wolf physiology to know that it would take drastically more each time, and not long for his body to build up a complete immunity to it. And it just might have something to do with Kevin and Shane both being there last time, and he desperately didn't want that. Wolf. He could shift to wolf, run far from the city, and lose what was Jess in the animal mind. No, he'd still be running alone, and the memories would never lie completely quiet. He could no more be entirely wolf than he could be entirely human. Better just to get it over with, save himself all the pain between now and the inevitable, anyway. He took his knife out of his jacket, shrugged out of the jacket itself, and pulled out the largest knife blade. The ragged sleeves of his worn sweatshirt he pushed up out of his way. Now, which way was best? Across? No, wolf blood would clot too quickly. He had to do more damage than that to kill himself. He didn't notice the footsteps, but he caught the scent. Only that saved Shane from getting the knife in his guts. Don't be such a fucking idiot. Put the knife away. Impassive as ever, Shane sat beside him. Go away. You don't want me around. No one does. I never said that. I said I was tired of taking care of you. It would have been more real if I said I was tired of seeing you need somebody to look out for you. You were supposed to stay in Haven and get your life straightened out. So why the fuck are you back here? Because nobody trusts me. They said they did, but they don't. They lied, and you lied, and everybody lies, and nobody's even going to notice when I'm dead. Give it a break, Jess. You don't want to die, and we both know it. Get the jacket back on before you freeze, put the knife away before I take it, and come on, we're going home. I don't have a home, Jesse said half-heartedly, but he obeyed anyway. He went with Shane, back to the apartment. Nothing had changed. After his room in Haven, it was awful. But at least it was familiar and trustworthy. There's probably something edible around, Shane said. Jess shook his head. I'm okay. Though it was out of place to say it, he wasn't going to eat if he wasn't hungry. Bane had told him true wolves could survive for over a week without food, and python it when they could. Werewolves tended to be tougher than true wolves. The coon he had devoured last night would keep him comfortably until tomorrow. He didn't want to think about Bane. Shane shrugged. Your life. Go have a shower. You've obviously been sleeping rough and you need one. Badly. Too empty inside to care, one way or the other. Jesse obeyed. Memories stirred again, of trying to get clean after 2 weeks in the forest, but he buried it ruthlessly. He just couldn't cope with that right now. The clothes in his backpack weren't noticeably cleaner than the ones he had been wearing, but he could figure out what to do about that tomorrow. Right now, he left the bathroom, to find that all the lights were off, leaving only the glow of the streetlights outside through the 2 small windows, and Shane was in bed already, waiting. He curled up against Shane under the blankets, shivering a bit. Shane slid an arm over him, sharing warmth. Well, what physical warmth Shane ever had to share with a body temperature that reminded him more of a dryad's. Shane was certainly no elven mage. But the other kind of warmth, that was another matter. "Shane," he said, after a few minutes. "I really need to tell you something." "What?" "I'm a werewolf." "Oh. I was scared maybe you were going to say you're back on the fucking drugs again." "I mean it. I can be a wolf when I try. At least I won't have to worry so much about whether you're safe." There was that. "Drugs are no good. They don't work anymore." "All the better," Shane said. "Shut up and go to sleep." And that is the end of 34. And I think, since I've been doing this for a little over an hour and a half, I'm going to call it a day. I'm not entirely sure at this point that this is an ideal setup. We'll take a look at possibilities and stuff and see what else we might be able to do as far as a setup that gives me some back support for an hour and a half or 2 hours at a time, and doesn't have constant distractions when I'm in the middle of trying to read dramatic scenes. So we'll see. Anyway, anyone who's been watching, or who watches the recordings of this later on in the future, thank you for hanging around. I hope you're enjoying the story. If you're looking for the text version, of course, prismcat.com/blackwolf. Free, absolutely, always. I don't write for, or as a kind of, or a source of income. If I did that, I'd stop having fun with it. I just do it because I love doing it. So, everybody be good. Wash your hands. Lots. Stay home if you possibly can. Be thoughtful and kind and polite to each other. And that definitely includes anybody who is still at work in essential services, because they're risking their safety out there, making sure that we can buy groceries and pet food and pharmacy stuff and have running water and electricity and garbage pickup and all that kind of stuff. And absolutely, beyond any question, all healthcare workers right now are my heroes. So, I'll be back tomorrow about the same time, give or take. And until then, be safe.